And good evening. Protecting the sequoias, firefighters working around the clock to save America's historic trees as a wildfire continues to burn in Yosemite National Park. The new aerial footage, take a look, shows plumes of thick smoke billowing out at the park as the raging wildfire chars more than 2,400 acres. Firefighters and park officials now doing everything they can to stop the flames from reaching a grove of giant sequoias, the world's largest trees and our national treasures, some 3,000 years old, all now under threat. The park's busy south entrance is closed and areas near the fire were evacuated. Tonight, this firefight is far from over, with dry and hot conditions helping this wildfire spread. Let's get right to Miguel Almaguer, who leads us off tonight from the fire zone.
Exploding in size again overnight, Yosemite's Washburn fire is quickly sweeping through the national park as more than 500 firefighters lose ground against the out-of-control blaze.
Just trying to keep the fire from climbing the trees.
Torching forest land and fueled by millions of trees, flames now flank the 600 massive and iconic sequoias inside the park, a national treasure under serious threat.
They're incredibly fire resilient. It's just the fire's so different right now.
Biologist Garrett Dickman says Yosemite and California has never seen infernos like these. Mega fires fueled by extreme drought, the new normal, incinerating trees that withstood flames for thousands of years.
We've lost 20% of all giant sequoias on Earth in the past two years alone. So, I mean, at this point, every tree counts.
Climate change is playing a role in how these fires burn. They're now hotter, faster, and more explosive than ever before.
Those dangerous conditions creating their own weather system on the ground. The fire's powerful updraft launching tree limbs hundreds of feet into the sky, narrowly missing firefighting aircraft. Tracking the fast-moving blaze from above,
Fire's edge is active.
The outer rim of the swirling inferno has forced the closure of Yosemite's popular south entrance, triggering 1,600 evacuations.
The smoke was overwhelming. By the time we got down into Yosemite Valley, ash was raining down on us.
Inside Yosemite's famed Mariposa Grove, where protected sequoias are more than 2,000 years old and over 300 feet high.
I'm standing right in front of the grizzly giant.
A simple sprinkler system is keeping soil wet around the grizzly giant, arguably the world's most famous tree. Protective foil now also wraps the historic Galen Clark cabin, but flames are within striking distance.
Crews are lining every hillside they can, but this fire is quickly racing from tree to tree. In some areas, they're simply going to let it burn.
Tonight, that burn destroying everything in its path and still threatening to uproot these iconic natural wonders that have stood tall for generations.
All right, Miguel Almaguer joins us now live from Yosemite tonight. Miguel, protecting those massive sequoias we see just behind you is a major feat. From watching your report, Miguel, it's tough to tell who has the upper hand here. It seems like those sprinklers are working, but those flames seem so massive.
Yeah, Tom, it's incredible. Firefighters tell us late tonight they have not lost a single sequoia in Yosemite Valley. An incredible feat. I want to give you some perspective on just how massive these trees are. Let me turn to our second camera here, which is a few hundred feet away from where I'm standing. Imagine there are 600 of these majestic beauties all across the valley floor. All of them are still standing from this fire. They remain intact. The flames have not reached the base of this fire. Tonight, it is roughly 25% contained. It is still on the move, not yet out of the woods yet. Tom, back to you.
Okay, Miguel Almaguer leading us off tonight from Yosemite. Miguel, we appreciate it. We are joined now by Nancy Philippi, Public Information Officer with Yosemite Fire. Nancy, thanks so much for joining us from the fire zone tonight. We appreciate it. Miguel just said it there. There are 600 trees. Are we going to lose any trees, you think, in this fire, any sequoias?
I mean, we've put every measure in place to ensure that we are protecting them to the best of our abilities, and we're confident with the plan we have moving forward with the hazard fuel reduction and like you saw, that temporary sprinkler system.
25% contained right now. Talk to me about what the firefight's going to look like going into the night.
Well, today's the first day that we've been able to report some containment, so that's a huge success. It's hard to be working these long hours and working in these conditions and showing that 0% containment. So it has already been a really difficult fight. So we're just appreciative of all the resources we've already received and just continue to try and get this fire out.
So, Nancy, you know, we saw in that report, and you mentioned that sprinkler system, but we also saw the aerials. And if you would do me a favor and just look behind you, you can see that giant plume of smoke that is so close to where you are right now. What gives you guys so much confidence right now that the sequoias will be protected?
Right. We have a past history of prescribed burns in the Grove, which is amazing. That fueled with, or what we see happen with, sorry, the aircraft is distracting. When unwanted fire gets into that area, it tends to slow down into those footprints of where we've had previous fire. So that in combination with the treatment that we've been doing this week and that sprinkler system, it's a good system.
Finally, talk to us about the firefighting effort tonight. Nancy, you mentioned the attack from above. How many firefighters are we talking about, and are they working around the clock?
Yeah, we have over 500 firefighters working around the clock. Exactly right. It's hot and dry out here, and they're working long hours, getting a little bit of sleep, and firefighter public safety is our top priority, as well as the community of Wawona who had to evacuate Friday afternoon. And we really want to get those folks back into their homes as quickly and as safely as possible.
Nancy Philippi with Yosemite Fire. Nancy, good luck to you and your teams out there. We know it is a big, big battle. All right, besides those wildfires out west, we're also tracking the extreme heat this summer. Triple-digit temperatures in many parts across the country. Al Roker joining Top Story tonight. Al, we know it's summer, but your banner sets it right there. This is dangerous heat.
It really is, Tom. And in fact, you look right now from the Pacific Northwest across the Southwest, 36 million people impacted going all the way into the lower Mississippi River Valley, and that's going to last for at least another day. Look at these heat indexes. Air temperatures that are triple digits for San Antonio and San Angelo, Dallas, but the heat index is 3 to 5 degrees above average, triple digits for Little Rock and Baton Rouge. That'll last at least another 24 hours. Tonight, we've got the risk of severe weather for 7 million people south of Chicago to the west of Detroit, north of Indianapolis, and just to the north of St. Louis. It shifts into the northeast tomorrow as a front pushes this way. 17 million people from New England, Albany, Burlington, Portland, Scranton, all the way down to Washington, D.C. Can't rule out a tornado or two. And we're also watching the Gulf Coast. Right now, you can see scattered showers and thunderstorms from Louisiana to the panhandle of Florida. There's an area of low pressure that's trying to develop, and the National Hurricane Center gives it a 30% chance of development in the next 2 days. Slow development in this zone through the southern Gulf. If it became a tropical system, it would be Danielle. However, don't let the classifications fool you. This thing is going to dump a ton of rain because it's a slow mover. We could be looking at some localized flooding because of anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain from Lake Charles all the way to the Panama City area of the panhandle of Florida. Tom?
All right, going to be a wet week down there, down south. Al, thank you. Now to major developments in the January 6th investigation. A judge today denying a request from Steve Bannon to delay his contempt trial after the Trump insider made an about-face and said he was willing to testify. Ali Vitale tonight from the Capitol.
Top Trump ally Steve Bannon still in the legal crosshairs tonight after a judge ruled his new willingness to testify before the House January 6th committee will not delay his trial for contempt of Congress. It comes after that stunning reversal from Bannon to cooperate with the very committee he'd previously stonewalled and ridiculed.
The J6 committee is totally irrelevant.
Federal prosecutors arguing Bannon's about-face over the weekend was little more than an attempt to change the optics of his contempt on the eve of trial. Bannon has remained defiant while facing misdemeanor charges of up to 2 years in jail and steep fines if convicted. He's pleaded not guilty.
This is going to be the misdemeanor from hell for Merrick Garland, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden.
Today, the judge ruling Bannon's team cannot subpoena the House Speaker or members of Congress. The committee is interested in Bannon's activities in the lead up to the 6th, including these comments the day before.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
Over the weekend, Bannon's attorney saying his new position is not a change of heart, but of circumstance.
He said he's willing to comply if they just resolve the privilege issue.
Bannon had argued he could not testify because former President Trump invoked executive privilege. But Saturday, Mr. Trump sent a letter to Bannon saying he was waiving that privilege because, quote, I watched how unfairly you and others have been treated. Though the committee argues executive privilege doesn't apply. And now the Department of Justice citing Trump's former lawyer, saying Trump never invoked executive privilege over any information or materials. Tonight, among the sticking points over Bannon's testimony, Bannon wants to testify live and in public. But committee members say not likely. Meanwhile, the committee preparing for Tuesday's hearing focused on how the mob came to the Capitol, including a former spokesperson for the extremist group, the Oath Keepers, as a live witness, and highly anticipated new taped testimony from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone. All this as a new documentary shows Mr. Trump again minimizing his supporters' actions that day.
The people went to Washington primarily because they were angry with an election that they think was rigged. A very small portion, as you know, went down to the Capitol, and then a very small portion of them went in.
All right, Ali Vitale joins Top Story tonight from Capitol Hill. Ali, as the country gets ready for tomorrow's hearing, I know you have some new reporting about what's supposed to happen Thursday, and there's been some back and forth.
Yeah, new back and forth tonight, Tom, because our sources told us initially we were set to expect 2 hearings from the January 6th committee this week, one tomorrow and then one in primetime on Thursday. Now our sources telling us that that Thursday hearing has been rescheduled and will happen next week. This is all a result of the fact that the committee is getting an influx of new information in real time. They've had to be flexible the entire time they've been doing these hearings. This week, no exception, Tom.
Okay, Ali Vitale for us. Ali, we thank you. At the White House today, a speech by President Biden on the new bipartisan gun law suddenly interrupted by a father of a Parkland shooting victim. The surprising moment coming as the president faces growing dissatisfaction within his own party. Here's Kelly O'Donnell.
Almost 2,000 gathered today on the South Lawn to mark the most hard-fought bipartisan achievement of the Biden era. The first new gun safety law in nearly 3 decades.
Lives will be saved today and tomorrow because of this.
One father, whose son died at Parkland, interrupted, shouting that more must be done.
Let him talk. Let him talk.
The president hailed the new law as progress, as his political standing appears precarious. A new poll from the New York Times finds 64% of Democratic voters say they would prefer a different leader in the 2024 election. Mr. Biden's age cited most. He'd be 82 right after the election.
We need some younger people in the office. That's, bottom line.
It should be the concern to everybody. Yeah, it's kind of up there.
However, the vice president said Sunday they expect to be in the race.
He intends to run, and if he does, I intend to run with him.
One clear warning, only 13% of Americans said they think the country is on the right track.
I feel like we're taking so many steps back right now. Am I right?
To counter doubters, the White House touts the strong job market and gas prices down 33 cents in the last month. Tomorrow, the president heads to Israel and Saudi Arabia, where he will push to increase oil supply to ease gas prices.
Can we get that price down, and can we keep it down?
All right, Kelly O'Donnell joins us now from the White House. Now, Kelly, that front page New York Times story on those polls was pretty bad for the Biden White House, but it wasn't all bad news, right?
Well, one of the things they could look to is that it shows those questioned about a potential head-to-head match again with President Biden and former President Trump, that Biden comes out a few points ahead on that. And the White House was asked to react to this polling and said that they believe that the majority of Democrats are still very much with President Biden. Tom?
So, Kelly, I know you've covered a few different White Houses. Talk to our viewers, because I'm curious about this whisper campaign, because it feels like it's coming from Democrats, this whisper campaign to sort of see if President Biden does not run for re-election. How unusual is this? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is sort of Ted Kennedy challenging Jimmy Carter back in 1980. But have we seen that since then at this level? Because for me, it's so early. We're not even at the midterms yet.
Well, criticism of a president is nothing new. What really stands out about this, and I think it's something the president cannot control, and that is his age. He will turn 80 in November. That means in a re-election, if he's on the ballot in 2024, he'll be almost 82, entering a second term if he wins, all the way to age 86. And that is a first in American history. He's already the oldest sitting president. So that seems to be complicating things. Add to that some of the dissatisfaction about job approval. And when you look at inflation, rising prices, how weary everyone is about COVID, there are issues that are going to put the president in some political peril. It is unusual to have this kind of whisper campaign that's not so much a whisper anymore. It's a subtle roar at times. But will it change when the midterms come around? That could be. And certainly the president plans to be very actively engaged in campaigning leading up to November, when he hopes to increase the number of Democrats to try to get more of his policies through. Tom?
Kelly O for us tonight. Kelly, we appreciate it. We head overseas now to Sri Lanka. Striking footage we're seeing. The country's leader fled as thousands of protesters took over the palace. The nation dealing with an economic crisis and demanding new leadership. Megan Fitzgerald has that story.
Tonight in Sri Lanka, the country's most chaotic day in months of political turmoil. Tens of thousands of people storming the presidential palace and prime minister's home, setting fire to one of the buildings on Saturday in a rage over the nation's severe economic crisis. Soldiers were unable to hold back protesters from entering the homes, firing shots and tear gas. More than 30 people reported hurt in the chaos. Protesters holding President Gotabaya Rajapaksa responsible for the nation's economic meltdown, setting off acute shortages of essential items like food, fuel, medicine, and other necessities. Reuters reporting the president evacuated Friday as a safety precaution ahead of the planned protest, according to two defense ministry sources. Footage from the presidential palace also showed people taking a swim in the pool, working out and relaxing on beds, some making statements from the conference room that the president and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe must immediately quit.
To get rid of the president and the Prime Minister and to have a new era for Sri Lanka. Also, I feel very, very sad that they didn't go earlier, because had they gone earlier, there wouldn't have been any destruction. And it's time that we got all our stolen money back to this country. The president and prime minister agreed to resign this upcoming Wednesday, but it's been months of unrest. Protests erupted in May, mainly blaming the president and his family for mismanaging the nation's finances.
They took decisions that set the Sri Lankan economy on a downward spiral.
The Rajapaksas have dominated Sri Lankan politics for years. After his brother resigned as prime minister under pressure, President Rajapaksa appointed the current prime minister, hoping the politician would use his diplomacy and contacts to rescue a collapsed economy.
Ranil Wickremesinghe has the experience and has the international contacts that in theory, he could have been the right prime minister to deal with some of these issues. He essentially postponed the inevitable, which was the fall of the Rajapaksa dynasty.
Today, the protesters vowing to occupy residences until the president and prime minister officially quit.
We don't trust him anymore.
According to Sri Lankan's constitution, parliament must elect a new president within 30 days when the position is vacated.
Many of these protesters are saying that the administration should have never underestimated the power of the people. And while they have been successful in removing the current administration from power, experts say the crisis that Sri Lanka is facing right now could take years for them to recover from.
Now to Japan, still reeling from the shocking assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Tonight, authorities investigating a church with reported ties to the gunman's mother as mourners begin to pay their respects to the nation's longest-serving leader. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer reports.
Tonight, mounting questions around the shocking assassination of Shinzo Abe, the former prime minister's body arriving at a Tokyo temple for a private wake. Outside, hundreds of mourners paying respect to Japan's longest-serving leader. I think he gave the Japanese something to be proud about, this woman said. I hope he'll rest in peace. Secretary of State Antony Blinken making his way to Japan, sharing condolences from President Biden.
We're friends, and when a friend is hurting, other friends show up.
Tonight, police are investigating their own security failures. There were 2 shots fired. You can see Abe turn around after the first, but security doesn't subdue the gunman. who's able to fire a second time before he's tackled. Police say the suspected gunman confessed to killing Abe and that he believed the former prime minister was tied to a religious group widely known as the Unification Church, which he says his mother was obsessed over and eventually caused her financial stress. Investigators seized multiple weapons in a raid on his home. Several Japanese media outlets reporting he said he planned to make explosives for the attack, but switched to a homemade gun instead. Still, in the wake of tragedy, Japanese voters heading to the polls, an election Abe was campaigning for when he was shot. Leaders holding a moment of silence before announcing results. A landslide victory for Abe's party, and now a huge majority in parliament.
A private funeral will be held for Shinzo Abe on Tuesday, and officials say a public memorial service will be announced at a later date. Tom?
Okay, Janice, thank you. We stay overseas now in Ukraine. It's a race against time as crews search for survivors after an apartment building was hit by a Russian missile, killing at least 33 people so far. This as Russia gains ground in the east and attacks on civilians seem to be escalating. NBC's Ellison Barber is there with more.
Tonight, the Russian military intensifying its relentless assault on civilians, striking an apartment building in Kharkiv. And in eastern Donetsk, Ukrainian officials say dozens are dead after a Russian missile hit this 5-story apartment building over the weekend. Rescuers diligently combing through the rubble. Families desperate for word on their loved ones. This man is looking for his sister and nephew. He says he is waiting for a miracle. For some, miracles have come. Rescuers pulled 9 people from the rubble injured but alive. Ukraine's President Zelensky accused Russia of targeting civilians as Russia now gains ground in eastern Ukraine. Attacks like these have forced some Ukrainians to spend their weekends learning first aid, pressure release, and how to spot unexploded munitions.
Come look in here. This is just one example of things that people have to now look out for across Ukraine. This is an unexploded ordnance. This one is fake, but they can be real and very, very dangerous.
Irina took the class.
Unfortunately, we have to live in this reality.
Do you see this? A reality with no end in sight. Russia continues to claim it does not target civilians. Meanwhile, Turkey's president spoke on the phone with President Putin today, trying to get Russia to end its blockade of Ukrainian grain, which has sparked a global food crisis. Tom?
All right, back now on Top Story. One mother-to-be is arguing that if a fetus is a person, being pregnant should qualify you to drive in the HOV lane. NBC's Morgan Chesky has more on this interesting take in Post-Row America.
Tonight, a pregnant woman fighting a ticket, along with a much bigger battle, after she got pulled over by police for riding solo in the HOV lane.
I can see the signs. It says HOV, parentheses, 2.
The HOV lane requires drivers to have at least one passenger in their cars when they use the lane. But at 34 weeks pregnant, Brandy Batone had an answer for the officer.
He starts peeking around. He's like, is it just you? And I said, no, there's 2 of us. And he's like, well, where's the other person? And I went right here.
After the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade on June 24th, Batone said if an unborn child is considered a living person, she had every right to be there.
And I said, well, not trying to throw a political mix here, but with everything going on, this counts as a baby.
Although the penal code in Texas recognizes a fetus as a person, it appears there's no language in the state transportation department's code that recognizes a fetus as a person or a passenger.
What this is expressing is the complication of the inconsistent methods that Texas uses to define who is and who is not a person. The law literally defines who counts as a person in different ways in different contexts. What she is doing is forcing the law to define who's a person or an individual in ways that it didn't think about that are going to be really, really difficult to do.
We reached out to the Sheriff's Department and the State Transportation Department, but have not heard back. Deputies told Batone that if she fought the ticket, it would likely be dismissed. She plans to fight the ticket of about $200 with the argument that her in utero baby should count as another occupant of her vehicle.
I really don't feel like it's right, because one law is saying it one way, but then another law is saying it another way.
If the authorities don't just drop it, which would be the smart thing to do, you run the risk of it landing in the courtroom of a judge who wants to use this to make a point, specifically a political point. And under those circumstances, it could become a bigger bombshell than it already is.
All right, and with that, Morgan Chesky joins us now live from Texas. So, Morgan, a lot of people are going to be following this story. What's next in this case?
Yeah, Tom, that is a very good question. And the answer could be that Baton may be in a courtroom or a delivery room, because her upcoming court date for that nearly $200 ticket also happens to fall on or around the exact due date for her new child. Tom?
All right, complicating things just a little bit. Morgan Chesky for us. Morgan, we thank you for that. All right, time now for Top Stories Newsfeed. We begin with the shooting at a Little League tournament in North Carolina. The new video shows the young players and coaches dropping to the ground as gunshots rang out. This happened about 40 miles east of Raleigh. No one on the field was hit, but a bullet did land just feet from a child. Authorities believe the shooting took place in a nearby parking lot and that no one at the game was the intended target. Still very scary. Next to the brazen robbery at a Tennessee gun store that was caught on camera. Surveillance video shows the suspects crashing a red pickup truck through the store near Nashville. At least 3 people began grabbing guns off the wall before fleeing. The store says the thieves took off with an estimated $10,000 worth of weapons. The ATF now involved in this one. And a warning tonight for beachgoers in San Diego after some were chased by sea lions. New video shows the marine mammals charging at La Jolla Cove, sending the crowd fleeing in terror. Luckily, no one was hurt, but officials say it's pupping season, and visitors are urged to keep their distance from the animals. And we're getting the first look at the highly anticipated images taken from NASA's James Webb Space Telescope. President Biden unveiling the first image late today. Here it is. Let's take a look at it. Okay, pretty impressive there. NASA says it's the deepest and sharpest infrared view of the universe ever captured. It shows galaxies as they appeared up to 13 billion years in the past. A full batch of color images will be released tomorrow. Okay, next tonight we're transitioning now to another new reality in post-Roe America. A French company is asking the FDA to consider over-the-counter birth control. But how soon can we expect a decision? NBC's Stephanie Gosk has more.
When the birth control pill was first approved, it ushered in a sexual revolution.
Birth control, especially the pill, provided women the choice.
More than 60 years later, a French company is asking the FDA to approve an over-the-counter version at a very different time in America's history, just weeks after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In that decision, the Supreme Court said the right to contraception would not be affected, but in a concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas suggested it should be. HRA Pharma says it started the FDA application process 7 years ago, and the timing is coincidental.
Do you think it's possible that women may go to the doctor less because they no longer need to go to the doctor for the pill?
There is some concern that people only end up going to the doctor because they need birth control. It's not right to hold birth control hostage by a prescription when it is not scientifically necessary, just so that we can get people in to see us.
It comes as the Biden administration faces increased pressure to take action on reproductive rights issues, including potentially declaring a public health emergency over abortion.
Something I'm asked the folks, the medical people in the administration to look at, whether I have the authority to do that and what impact that would have.
But the administration says it will let the FDA dictate the timeline. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists is hopeful.
Over-the-counter birth control is going to be helpful for everyone, but it certainly is going to be helpful for those who are most marginalized in our country.
A major hurdle to getting birth control pills could soon be a thing of the past. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
All right, now to Top Stories Global Watch and a violent crackdown on protesters in China. Disturbing new video shows protesters dragged down stairs and held down by security personnel outside of a bank in Zhengzhou. The bank froze millions of dollars worth of deposits in April, leaving hundreds of thousands of customers without access to their money for months. And a group of hikers lucky to be alive after they became caught in an avalanche in Kyrgyzstan. This is new video. It shows a plume of snow, ice, and dust come barreling down the Tian Shan Mountains. The hiker recording the video, eventually ducking under a rock to hide from the debris. This is just east of Afghanistan. The 9 Brits and 1 American were on a guided tour at the time. No one was seriously hurt, including that cameraman. Okay, and heavy snowstorms trapping drivers in central Chile. New video shows police evacuating cars and buses. Look at that. Drivers trapped on a snow-covered mountain road. Authorities say about 250 vehicles became trapped. Some areas of the country hit with nearly 4 feet of snow this weekend. Okay, and sticking in that region, we have more from the Americas. Today marks 1 year after tens of thousands of Cubans took to the streets, the largest protest in decades, demanding change from the communist government. A year later, hundreds of demonstrators arrested that day are still in prison. NBC's Morgan Radford has more.
Today, the streets of Havana remained quiet, but the echoes of last year's unprecedented protests still hang in the air. The chance for change, unlike anything the island has seen in decades. People gathering by the thousands in what would turn into the largest protest in Cuba since communist leader Fidel Castro took control in 1959. Across the islands, Cubans fed up with rising inflation, ongoing political oppression, and shortages of food and medicine, made worse by the pandemic. Their rallying cry, Patria y Vida, homeland and life, a take on the Castro regime motto, Patria o Muerte, homeland or death. The mantra later turned into an anthem. But for those in Cuba, their rallies were met with a swift crackdown. The communist government arrested over 1,000 protesters, charging many with sabotage, public disorder, and sedition. Now, 1 year later, many of those protesters still behind bars. Although the government hasn't released the exact number, one humanitarian group estimates that at least 700 Cubans remain in detention, 622 of those sentenced to up to 25 years in prison.
¿Cuál es tu mayor sueño para Cuba? At the end of the day, what is your biggest dream for Cuba?
Hay más de 1,000 presos políticos y que esa liberación sea el principio de un cambio hacia un país democrático.
Raul Prado was among those arrested last July. He was later forced into house arrest, and for the future of his family, says it became clear that he needed to leave the country.
I didn't want him to grow up in a place where his family doesn't have a voice.
I spoke with Prado shortly after he arrived in Miami. There, he reunited with his wife, who came after him just a few months later, crossing the U.S.-Mexico border alone in the dead of night while 8 months pregnant.
So many people are leaving your country. Something is wrong in your country.
Since the protests, tens of thousands of Cubans have fled the island, some by land, others by sea. The pace of this most recent wave of Cuban migration so great that it surpassed the infamous 1980 Mariel boat exodus, when some 125,000 migrants sailed from Cuba to the shores of Florida, pushed by a stagnant economy. Castro also opened prisons and mental institutions, allowing anyone who wanted to leave the island. Today, Cubans like Carlos Manuel Alvarez, a journalist and author who left Cuba in 2015 and has been detained and interrogated by the Cuban government multiple times, says that July 11th forever changed Cuban history and consciousness.
¿Cree usted que Cuba es diferente desde aquel momento, ese 11 de julio, hace un año? Do you think Cuba is different today than it was a year ago?
La cabeza de la gente cambió.
You think that the people's minds have changed?
Y probablemente eso sea lo más importante para lograr un cambio real en la isla.
And you think that's perhaps the biggest cause of change, to see a real change on the island?
He hopes that day was a step in a new direction.
Morgan Radford joins us now in studio. So, Morgan, I know you've been covering this story for a year now. What, if anything, has changed on the island?
What's interesting is that one thing that Carlos mentioned was that the mental shift, he felt like, was the biggest step forward. This was a time where people finally could acknowledge that they felt this way, and the community sense of swell around them, they said, was significant. But what's also interesting is that Raul, the gentleman we met in Miami, he said, look, you know, it's also changed that you know that your neighbors are starting to feel this way. Because when he protested before July 11th, the people who were banging on his windows and were shouting at him, they were his own neighbors. And now, after July 11th, he said it wasn't so much my neighbors. They were more supporting me, and there was a shift. So the people who were against me were more state agents. So they said that this sense it's a big deal to see that mental shift.
You know, when you are in Miami, you can still see cars that have the Patria y Vida written on them. It's faded a little bit, but it's still there, and the sentiment's still there. And I feel it's a sentiment that's been there since 1959, and it's frustrating for a lot of Cuban Americans because, of course, things have never changed. And for the Cubans, Cubans on the island. What, if anything, changes with the government or the U.S. relationship with Cuba right now after what's happened over the last year?
Well, a lot has changed in terms of the Biden administration. There are three kind of main things. Number one, you can see flights reinstated that go to the nether parts of the island, right, and the eastern parts of the island. But you also see things like the family reunification program reinstated, or the end of the cap on remittances that you can send back to family. So those are changes that Cubans on the island see. But the question they have is sort of, what is the larger intent behind these changes? One thing that Carlos said was, it's interesting watching this current administration because he can't really tell if they have one foot sort of in the predecessor from Biden's, from Obama's administration when they were focused on opening up relations, or there still seems like there's also a foot in the Trump administration policies, which was closing the relationship between the two.
You know, dissidents are still being jailed. You still cannot speak out against the government. Things are still very bad in Cuba. We hear from our family. What is the sense you're getting from the people you're talking to? Because I know you have so many good relationships there still in that country. Do people think they're ever going to see a change?
People do believe in change. I mean, in fairness, when I was living there, studying there, this was not something, July 11th was not something that I could have anticipated because people still spoke in hushed tones. Right. But now, look, I mean, to be clear, there is a diversity of thought, right, on the island and well as here. And so I think people feel that there is hope that voices can be included and that there can be change, hopefully, in the near future so that even more voices can be elevated.
Maybe a diversity of voices, but also voices that don't get imprisoned when they say what they believe. We're going to have to wait and see. All right, Morgan, we thank you so much. Okay, when we come back, the big news from Amazon. It's that time of year, Prime Day. The super deals you have not heard about, everything from items for your kitchen to a new 60-inch TV so you can watch Top Story. Stay with us. All right, welcome back now. Time for Money Talks, what consumers and investors need to know from the business world and beyond. Tomorrow marks the beginning of Amazon's annual deal event, Prime Day. From July 12th to the 13th, Amazon Prime members will get access to deals ranging from tech and home and almost anything else you can think of. The event has grown over the past 8 years and is now offered in more than 20 countries. I want to bring in Dan Ackerman from CNET, which is, of course, the place online to find the latest product reviews and news to help us out. So, Dan, people are going to be shopping tomorrow. Maybe they'll be at work. Who knows? But they can't waste time. So that's why we called you in here. Talk to us about some of the best deals. I know they're in the tech world.
Yeah, Prime Day is really big for personal technology, consumer electronics. A lot of the deals, frankly, start around the end of June because they get into that pre-July 4th mode and then July 4th sales and pre-Prime Day sales and now Prime Day. The biggest discounts from Amazon, at least, are very often on devices that, surprise, Amazon makes, like the, Echo devices that use Alexa and Kindles and Fire TV sticks. Those are usually pretty deeply discounted, probably about as much as you'd see outside of Black Friday.
What if I'm looking for a new home product for the kitchen or for around the house?
That's another good area for Prime Day, both from Amazon and a lot of the competing brands like Target and Best Buy that have sales at the same time to try to capitalize on it. I'm already seeing, things like air fryers, that big KitchenAid mixer that everybody loves. That's already on sale as an early Prime Day deal. So kitchen devices and home electronics, kind of two sides of the tech coin, are two of the really big categories.
Air fryers. Now you're talking my language. All right, you got me hooked now. What about some items if I'm looking to get something for the kids?
Amazon has a version of its Fire tablet that's a kid's version that comes with a big cushiony case around it and a subscription to what I think is a really good kids software package. And those are, I think they're already half off, 50% off. And these are great bulletproof tablets for toddlers and young kids if they're not ready to trade up to an iPad.
Kids and tablets, all right. It's a little taboo, but I know what you mean. All our kids have them. There's also a new perk involving food delivery, right?
Now, this is really interesting. Grubhub, which is also known as Seamless in some cities, they have a premium tier where you get like free delivery and a bunch of other extras. You have to pay for it every month. So if you're an Amazon Prime member, now you can get a year of that service for free, which is probably worth, I think, about $100. And you just have to remember, I already set my reminder to cancel at the end of June 2023.
Yeah, that's always the tough part, right? You always go past that date. And Dan, I know you mentioned earlier there's some competitors to Amazon also trying to get in on the days of deals. What should people be shopping around for or also clicking on?
I think a lot of the stores are going to have a lot of the same products on sale, whether it's Walmart or Target or Best Buy. They all have like summer sales that are the same day as Prime Day, but they don't call it Prime Day, obviously. So you would do well to comparison shop between all of these using a price comparison service, using some historical price tracking like on Camel, and just making sure that you check each of these stores to make sure you're not paying too much.
Dan, what are you buying tomorrow? Anything on your list?
You know what? I'm looking to replace my ancient soundbar system for my TV that I just checked. I actually bought 12 years ago. I think I'm due an upgrade.
Oh, and you deserve it, Dan. All right, man. Thanks so much for joining Top Story. We appreciate it. Dan Ackerman from CNET. When we come back, we told you about master storyteller Boyd Hooper, who just returned to work after battling cancer. Tonight, a story from Boyd about an incredible young man looking out for our nation's veterans right after this quick break. Finally tonight, the Eagle Scout proving age is just a number. The massive project he took on at 15 years old, the community he's now left an indelible mark on, and the lives he's now helping to honor. Boyd Hooper from our Minneapolis affiliate CARE TV has this story.
A civic-minded committee could have spent years fundraising and planning Minnesota's newest Veterans Memorial.
His dedication for this beautiful place of remembrance.
But Olivia didn't need a task force of business and political leaders to conceive and execute a plan this impressive. Just a teen.
That's me.
Dom Klausman could be forgiven for being a bit on edge as he prepared for this day's dedication.
I just try not to think about it because of the anxiety that it gets.
It's been only a month, after all, since Dom broke ground in a city park surrounded by local veterans who could still barely believe it.
15 years old, sophomore in high school. He's going to raise $12,000 to $15,000. We're thinking, really?
That okay with you? It's your show. Yep. Turns out Dom didn't raise his starting goal of $12,000 to $15,000 to give Olivia.
This is my dad.
A proper place to honor its veterans.
What's the total now?
$77,077.
How do you do that as a 15, 16-year-old?
I would ask myself the same thing.
15, when Dom started his Eagle Scout project by painting his town with flyers, meeting with veterans, and appearing in local media. 16, when Dom and his contractors finished the memorial.
This is something special.
Aaron Russell is a district executive for the Boy Scouts of America.
We were trying to figure out if there's been, in recent memory, a project of this scale, especially with the money raised, and we couldn't think or find anything even close to it.
So that right there is my dad's grandpa. This one is my grandpa's dad.
280 pavers recognizing veterans who served and those who gave their lives.
You're proud of yourself. Dominic.
Kim Werdish's son, James, was killed in Iraq.
James has been honored in many cities through connections with the military, and that's dear to us also. But this is our hometown.
James can be found across the way from Mark Hebig's father.
Alfred William Hebig. He served in Korea. I never knew him very good because he was killed in a car accident when I was 1 year old.
Mark drove 2 hours to see the memorial built by a teenager.
First time today.
That moved more than a few adults.
Very proud. Very proud.
Mark Jurgensen laced up the combat boots he wore in Iraq to make those 21 steps cast in his son's wet concrete.
This is really nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
No matter where you went, no matter what store you went into, it was, oh, is your son the Eagle Scout? And yep, he's working on his Eagle Scout forever and don't ever have my own name. It's your son's the Eagle Scout. Yep, he is.
No committee, no treasurer, no head of public relations. Just a boy.
The memorial before you is a result of the generosity and support that I and the veterans of our community have received.
Next time someone spouts off about the sorry state of today's young people, tell them about Dom.
Special young man.
The teenager whose legacy in Olivia is now etched in stone.
And our thanks to Dom tonight for all he's doing for veterans and to Boyd for bringing us that story. We also thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.